Hello and welcome. This is Thomas. My pronouns are he and him. Thank you for joining me today. I appreciate your presence with me. This podcast is being recorded in beautiful Honolulu, Hawaii. I acknowledge that the unceded Aina, or land on which I live, called Kakako, is part of the larger territory recognized by Kanaka Maoli, or Indigenous Hawaiians. I'm honored and grateful, as is my husband, for us to be guests of the Hawaiian Kingdom. When you argue with reality, you lose, but only 100% of the time. I heard this quote for the first time when reading a book by Byron Katie, and literally my brain screamed that I really needed to pay attention to this sentence. As a WayFinder coach trained in Byron Katie's work, literally called The Work, think about this. When you argue with reality, we're actually denying what is, what already exists. Who of you listening argues the fact that the sun comes up every day and that the earth rotates around the sun? Imagine dying on that hill as you argue against those two bits of reality. And of course, I'm going to trust no one of you does, because that is a part of a reality that we've actually come to accept as truth. In this podcast, I'm going to chat about accepting what is, how to move easily, and how to embrace reality around the notion of accepting what is. And I'm going to share some insight on how to make this common thread across our challenges, and it's this: our inability to deal with reality. I'm going to trust that I'll make it a wee bit easier for you. I often say to clients when they're challenged to accept what is, I ask them, can I ask you a question? Invariably, and sometimes reluctantly, they say yes. I share a swath of wisdom from Byron Katie, and it goes like this. If you want reality to be different than it is, you might as well try to teach a cat to bark. You can actually try, and in the end, the cat will look up at you and say, meow. Wanting reality to be different than it is actually hopeless. When you can spend the rest of your life, you can actually spend the rest of your life trying to teach the cat to bark. And of course, that's not possible. That's arguing with reality. So 99.9% of the time, a light shines in our hearts and we actually can begin to set ourselves free. So close to 100% of the time, a light shines within those clients that I ask that question, and they begin to set themselves free. It's actually really beautiful to watch. And I believe it's one of the biggest behaviors that we must actually face head on. Most of us refuse to, and I'll be one to own that, most of us refuse to see reality as it is, acting as if reality is actually ignoring us. So for example, wanting a relationship with my dad while he was alive, my dad was alcoholic. And I wanted the alcoholic not to drink. And that was difficult and that was painful. But I'm the one that argued with the reality because I was arguing against one of the things that alcoholics do. They drink. Certainly my anger and my hurt was completely normal until I kind of figured this out. And as soon as I accepted the reality of what was and stopped thinking that my father, as the alcoholic, wouldn't drink, or denying the reality of my dad because he was drinking, I actually got to have a relationship with him. I'm the one who had the bigger problem thinking an alcoholic doesn't drink. Once I stopped resisting arguing with reality and started accepting one of the things that alcoholics do is drink, then I actually put myself in this perfect place to respond from a place of greater peace, calm, and clarity of mind. My work was to show up when dad either wasn't completely drunk or maybe had fewer drinks. My gift by stopping the argument with reality was actually a really wonderful relationship with my dad. So this idea of being in conflict with reality will actually only turn us into casualties, right? I was a casualty, and the impact of that casualty for me was not having a relationship with my dad. When I stopped arguing that he was actually going to do something that I wanted him to do, but it was against his nature, I wanted to cat to bark. And what do cats do? So stop fighting what you don't know, what you can't manage, what you don't like, and what didn't go your way. We can't change reality, but we can change how we respond or react to it, allowing things to be as they are. Dad continued to drink for the rest of his life. And because I accepted that, I got a real cool relationship with the man. So I figured this out. Let me hand this truth to you. The only truth is reality. And listen to this tidbit of great information. We can be addicted to our emotions. Before something happens, right, your brain starts enjoying a pleasant outcome. This dopamine, the brain's pleasure neurotransmitter, spikes, anticipating a rewarding experience. Unfortunately, things don't always go as planned. Your dopamine, my dopamine drops all of a sudden due to disappointment. It's called an emotional gap, the difference between the experienced and, of course, the predicted, the thing that we thought was going to happen of an event. It's actually what scientists call, reward prediction error. And I think William James said it much better. Acceptance of what has happened is the first step to overcoming the consequences of any misfortune. Accepting reality requires literally refocusing our attention into what happened rather into what we wish, notice, should have happened. Adapting to reality doesn't mean giving up. It actually means giving up resistance to what you don't like, what actually happened. Going back to that notion of should, I live by this little moniker in my life. I do all I can, and sometimes I'm not successful, to not should all over myself. As I'm sharing with you, I'm reminded of the reality that unpleasantness is inevitable. How we perceive it, how we accept it, how we respond to it is what will determine our experience with life. For instance, the 2024 US election, its outcome. It offered me a really humbling opportunity to practice the accepting of what is. I chose to see, although I kicked and screamed and had my emotion around it for a moment, that life circumstances change constantly. I could live fully alive in a world of changes that was available to me. So I stopped resisting. I stopped contracting and closing myself off to that reality of that election. I then began to see the opening to create a larger community of support for myself as I moved forward in this reality. And let me share something that I find really intriguing. It's called the 5 illusions. It actually explains why reality, that thing that we can so readily argue against, it explains why reality hurts. And it's actually kind of simple, because it hurts. That's the answer I get every time I ask a coaching client why they resist reality. Reality is causing them pain. The truth is, and this was a tough one for me to really get, right? Because my intellect, my ego wanted to argue with it. And of course, remember, ego only comes from fear, because the truth is reality doesn't hurt. Reality is fantastic actually once you stop fighting it. It hurts because you're fighting it. Avoid these illusions if you want to end your argument with reality. Here's the beginning of the 5 illusions. The first one is, and oh my gosh, I spent, I'm going to say at least 29 years of my life with this aspect actually running my life. It's this notion of behaving like a victim. Questions like this: why is this happening to me? You ask as if the world should revolve around you. I certainly did. I do it all the friggin' time. Your ego, which can only come from fear, distorts your vision. It sees the world through a me lens that blinds you actually to reality. Our work is to stop behaving like a victim. It's the first step to stop being in resistance to actually what you don't like. The second of these 5 illusions, comparing your reality to others. It's impossible to appreciate what you have when you're actually dealing with high levels of negative emotions. Envy, hate, or jealousy. When you compare to others, what happens? When you compare to others, 100% of the time, you lose. You feel inferior. Life seems unfair because your reality is not as good as others. Comparing to others is actually like holding burning coal. You're the one that gets burned. The third of these illusions is called having expectations. This can actually be the worst form of ignorance. By clinging to your expectations, you fail to accept things as they are. Being attached, attached to expectations, fuels your anxiety. It's difficult to understand reality when your heart is busy anticipating the results that you want, that it is being the general manager of the universe. Being attached to expectations fuels anxiety. It's difficult to understand reality when your mind is busy anticipating actually the results that you want. So William Ward said it better than I could say it. And I know that you know this expression. The pessimist complains about the wind. The optimist expects it to change. The realist adjusts the sails. Attachment leads to expectations. Expectations lead to disappointment. And of course, the rest. You know much better than I do, or probably as well as I do. The fourth illusion is believing resistance will make things disappear. I believed, I really did, for a long period in my life that I wasn't gay. And by believing that I wasn't gay, running away from Calgary and living in Toronto for 2 years, the reason I went there was thinking, gay in Calgary, wow, gay won't be in Toronto. Believing that the resistance to all that would make that part of me disappear. So my ego, once again, got me into trouble. Not only do you resist reality, but you actually believe you can change it. When you fight and resist, stuckness. And with stuckness, turbulence in your life. And ultimately, with stuckness and turbulence, what happens to the resistance is it actually gets stronger. So here's one of the keys. Stop resisting and find the lesson. Right? I stopped resisting that the gay wasn't going to go away. I found the lesson. And of course, at 29, I was able to share that lesson with the world. One of the most extraordinary things I ever did was to come out. One of the scariest things I ever did was coming out. But the quotient of resistance for those 29 years, Richter scale, probably close to a 9. It was brutal. And today it isn't, which is really amazing. And finally, the fifth. I think you'll appreciate this and relate to it. I certainly do. Wanting things your way. We all hold stubbornness, and some of us hold it as a virtue. But we need to realize when to draw the line and stop fighting a lost battle. It actually takes a lot of courage to say no and quit. Quitting when things get hard can be an easy out, but not realizing when you need to change direction can be devastating. Our work is to find the right balance. Bruce Lee said it best regarding the importance of movement. He said, running water never grows stale. So you just have to keep on flowing. Isn't that lovely? Just keep on flowing. Remember, when you lack balance, you fall. Fisher-Price, the kid's toy maker, when I was growing up, had a commercial for these little toy people they called Weebles. Some of you will remember this. The jingle was, Weebles wobble, but they don't fall down. I remind myself really gently and playfully from time to time, be a Weeble as often as you can. Right? And when I can't be a Weeble and I fall, what do? I look for the lesson. I don't argue that I shouldn't have fallen, because of course I did. I then go and take a deep breath and I look for the lesson because it's there, right? I mine the circumstance for the lesson. And of course, because I accept falling down and I choose to mine it for the lesson, it doesn't mean that the acceptance is having me giving up. What makes accepting really easier, what makes accepting reality a little easier, is to hold it actually with open arms, right? To hold it with open arms. Acceptance is a choice to move from fantasy to thinking I know what's going on, to actually moving from being in control to actually moving to letting go of control. I mentioned earlier, it's about being open to finding the lesson. Acceptance prepares you to live in an ever-changing world because it is. It's the only guarantee, right? Cliche as it is, it's the only guarantee. So when life gives you lessons, make sorbet. It's dairy-free. It's kind of my version of the old saying. You can turn reality into something exciting. So let me toss a cliche your way. When one door closes, another opens. Here's what I've got to remind myself all the time. Let go of the friggin' closed door. And then go ahead and cross open the door sill to the one that's actually open. I gently remind myself, go ahead and use the energy of discovery to actually find out what's on the other side. A little bit of Honolulu experience here. My husband and I don't own a vehicle. We don't own one here in Honolulu. We don't own one in Vancouver. So both driving and getting stuck in traffic in Honolulu on this island is actually quite rare. And yet I'm told for drivers, it's a monstrous task to navigate the roads with an ever burgeoning and growing allotment of cars for a not ever burgeoning laneways, right? There's only so much space on this island. So we don't own a vehicle. Driving on this island, you get stuck in traffic. And then, of course, I've got a bit of a phobia. I don't like to drive on H1, the highway here on the island. It just kind of wigs me out, my stuff. So something as innocuous as a traffic jam will actually sometimes set my monkey mind, my brain into fighting mode. Here's how it starts. Why I am in this traffic jam. Why am I in this traffic jam? This is the worst day ever. This throws my whole day off. Or, of course, I'm never going to make it home. So notice what I'm doing. I'm starting to go to war with reality. And even after I get out of the traffic jam, I'm sometimes still pissed. And then later, there might be instances of recounting the traffic jam in all its stressful details. I'll do it to my husband. Hell, I'll do it to anybody that will actually listen for that matter. So let's say I was actually stuck in traffic for 15 minutes. In reality, those 15 minutes were the only moments the only moments of my life that were actually devoted to that traffic jam. Do you get that? The only thing that happened was I was in a traffic jam. Fact, the only thing that happened was I was in a traffic jam for 15 minutes. But if I ruminate over being stuck for the next 30 minutes and then tell the story to two people taking 5 minutes each, the 15-minute traffic jam has now taken up an extra 40 minutes of my time and energy and my bloody life. So really, reality is kinder than my thoughts because reality only inconvenienced me for 15 minutes, whereas my brain, my monkey mind, my ego, fear-based, inconvenienced me for an additional 40 minutes. And did those extra 40 minutes, did that extra 40 minutes of stressing about the traffic, did it do anything to change what happened for the 15 minutes that I was stuck in traffic? No, not at all. The cat still meowed. It didn't bark. So my worrying and stressing didn't cause anything to clear faster. It just made my day worse. Might have made my husband's day worse. And of course, if I just made my day far worse, then what am I trying to say here? It just made my day far worse than if I'd actually accepted that sometimes traffic jams happen, that they always clear at some point, that I can explain what happened if I was late. I could have decided to enjoy my time in the car listening to an audiobook, listening to my own podcast for that matter, or the radio of beautiful Hawaiian music, or simply quieted myself and began to think about whatever it is I needed to think about for those few moments. So letting go doesn't mean not caring. It means giving space to care about things that I get to choose. I get to choose. So let's talk about reconnecting with our adaptability. Right? I didn't adapt to that 15 minutes in the car in the way that I was taught as a child. Right? I was born with the ability to adapt, and so were you. My goddaughter and her older brother, they literally have PhDs in adaptation as children. And the reason they do, and they're so good at it, is that their parents, right, have yet to kind of school it out of them. So your education and mine and my upbringing and yours really erased adapting from our memory. But let's trust that the ability is still within us. You may have been taught that confronting your enemy means being strong, but those who can bend but not break are actually really the strong ones. And of course, this may sound a little silly, but consider mutating with a purpose. It may sound kind of silly, but bear with me a second here. When facing something that didn't go your way, be mindful or heartful of actually how you react. Do you need to be fluid and soft like running water, or do you need to be more aggressive? That's the mutating part of the situation. We have a view of the ocean on the 37th floor here. I watch it all the time. But I do remember growing up in Calgary, the Bow River. And at times when it flowed, and I know since not living there, it is actually flowed and flooded. But I do remember watching the riverbanks, right? Especially as the river overflowed. What it did to the riverbanks was it carved new waterways in any direction, and it added whatever depth it needed to flow. So I'm reminding myself and gently reminding you, be like a river when needed. Find the path of least resistance. You believe that putting more effort, like I do, I think if I work at it harder, it's going to make a difference. We believe that putting more effort on something will actually make it better. But more often than not, it's actually a waste of time. It's a waste of energy. The most successful ideas are the simplest, inviting you not to overcomplicate. Half of my problems are caused by overanalyzing and overthinking. Remember, analysis causes paralysis. The more I think I got to figure it out, the more I'm apt to do absolutely nothing. So be smart. Stop fighting what you can't control. And as Mel Robbins newly preaches, let them. My dear friend Leslie just shared this with me. And it's from a theory that Mel Robbins actually developed and literally just put out into the world. When you let them do whatever it is they want to do, it creates more control and emotional peace for you and a better relationship with the people in your life. Let them. And then ultimately, look to truth and look to turning to patience and perseverance into what is a struggle for you. There's a Ghanaian proverb that suggests it is the calm and silent water that can drown a person. So don't react. Pause, reflect, literally wait before you act. Remember, water can wear away rock. Think of what you don't like. Patience and perseverance can wear those away as well. So being slow and consistent can be more potent in the long run. And I think it's really important to release tension regularly, this notion of gently blowing off steam. The analogy that came up for me is learn to watch, right? Learn to watch life like watching a movie. Let go of your need to control all the events. Remember, like a mirror, reflect back any situation without thinking about it or changing it. Expend no unnecessary energy. That mirror has no ego. It reflects reality, not emotions. The best way to release tension is by not actually adding drama to it. Stop arguing with reality. Cats won't bark. Dogs won't meow. Stop thinking you know how they'll vote, how they'll respond, how they'll care, and let them. It's your gift of peace to you. I'd mentioned earlier part of my training from the Martha Beck Institute as a WayFinder coach has me certified to support my clients using Byron Katie. And it's literally called The Work. The premise is discovering that when you believe your thoughts, you suffer. But when you don't believe your thoughts, you inquire about those thoughts and you question them, right? There's the possibility that you won't suffer. And if I can support you in accepting what is within your life, I want to invite you to head to thomasdolan.com, click on the contact tab in the upper right-hand corner of that page, and send me a message. I'd be honored to offer you some support in allowing yourself to no longer argue with reality, to accept what is, and to let them. Thank you for spending your precious time with me. It's always helpful to have you rate, review, and share my podcast with family and friends, along with subscribing, of course, to Conversations with Thomas, wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, I'm a huge proponent of taking charge of your mental health. And that means seeking advice from professional therapists, counselors, psychologists, physicians, and other qualified professionals. These conversations are not meant to do anything different than what your professionals are actually suggesting you to do. The conversations I'm having with you are meant to help you find a place of inquiry, kind of an entrance point, if you will. But if you're experiencing ongoing mental health challenges, please seek some support from a licensed professional. I've not intended that anything I share is a replacement for their advice, as I said to you before. Most of what I share as subject matter on this podcast comes through me, right? The universe, the divine, God just comes through me. And of course, it's also sourced with some insights that comes from my husband. It comes from dear friends. It comes from my coach. It comes from family sometimes, or things I bump into on my daily walk along life's path. And I had a healthy dose of research. That's where this subject came from, right? Are you arguing with reality? Conversations is executive produced by me, Thomas Kevin Dolan. It's also executive produced by my purveyor of all things techie, my amazing husband, Adam Moe. And I'd love to hear from you. Please email me at conversationswt@gmail.com. Conversations, the W is with, the T is Thomas, @gmail.com. I'd love to read your feedback on my episodes, hear your suggestions for future conversations with Thomas, and if you're comfortable, sharing the impact that these episodes have had on you. I'd be honored to listen. I'd be honored to hold you in a space of what it is that you've bumped into because of what it is that I've shared. Thank you.